Every day he walked into school carrying his books in his arms, quietly, hoping no one would notice. Some kids laughed. Some just stared. No one ever asked why. But one morning, everything changed. A small act of kindness would touch every heart in the room, and that boy would never forget it. Aaron was 10 years old, a quiet boy with soft brown eyes and hair that always fell across his forehead. He lived with his mother in a tiny rented room on the edge of town. His father had left years ago, and his mother worked long hours cleaning offices just to pay the bills. There were days when dinner was just bread and tea, but Aaron never complained. He knew his mother was trying her best. Every morning, while other kids slung colorful backpacks over their shoulders, Aaron gathered his worn-out textbooks and notebooks in his arms. The bag he used to have had torn months ago, and buying a new one wasn't something his mother could afford. She had promised him she would get one soon, but he had seen the worry in her tired eyes. He told her not to worry. He could carry his books just fine. On the walk to school, he held everything close to his chest, careful not to drop anything. The other children rushed past him, laughing and chatting, their backpacks bouncing behind them. Sometimes he pretended he didn't notice. Sometimes he wished someone would walk with him. At school, when he entered the classroom, a few students glanced at him. Some didn't care at all. Others found it strange, but no one asked. He always went straight to his seat at the back by the window, placing his books carefully on the desk. His teacher, Miss Clara, had seen it from the first day. She was kind, gentle, and observant. She noticed how Aaron kept to himself, always quiet, always careful. She noticed how his notebooks were old, the pages thinned, the corners bent. But Aaron always did his work neatly, always finished on time, and always said, "Thank you." There was one boy who sat 2 desks ahead, Daniel. He was loud, cheerful, and came from a comfortable family. His backpack was new, his shoes always clean, and his lunchbox full. He saw Aaron sometimes, but didn't think much about him. They had never spoken beyond the occasional "hi." During lunch, Aaron would find a corner in the courtyard and eat whatever his mother had packed, usually a piece of bread or leftover rice wrapped in paper. He would sit alone, watching other kids run around with their friends. He didn't mind being alone. Or maybe he was just used to it. One day, as he was about to leave the school building, his book slipped from his hands and scattered across the hallway floor. A few students walked by and some giggled, but no one stopped. Aaron quickly knelt down, gathering his papers with shaky hands. He whispered to himself, "It's okay. It's fine." When he reached home that evening, his mother asked how his day was. He smiled and said what he always said, "It was good, Mama." But deep down, he wished life didn't feel so heavy in his small arms. A week later, something happened that made Aaron's quiet struggle even harder. It was a rainy Monday morning. The clouds were heavy and the wind was sharp. Aaron wrapped his books in an old plastic grocery bag to keep them from getting wet. As he hurried along the muddy road, he slipped near a puddle and his books fell again. Drops of water splashed across the pages, staining the ink. His heart pounded as he quickly wiped them with his sleeve. By the time he reached the school gate, his clothes were damp, his shoes soaked, and his hands cold. He ignored the whispers around him and entered the classroom. Daniel and his friends were huddled near the front, laughing about a video one of them had seen. When Aaron walked by holding his wet plastic bag, one of the boys, Rick, snickered loudly. "Hey, look! It's the backpackless boy again," Rick said, smirking. "Maybe he's starting a new trend." A few other students laughed under their breath. Aaron lowered his gaze and walked to his seat without saying a word. Miss Clara entered the room and began the lesson, but she had seen the humiliation on Aaron's face. She wanted to say something but held back, unsure how to approach it without embarrassing him further. Later that day, during art class, the students were asked to take out their supplies. Aaron carefully placed his wet notebook on the desk. Some pages were curled and blotched, and the edges stuck together. Daniel, who was sitting beside Rick, noticed Aaron struggling. Rick leaned over and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe he uses magic pockets instead of a bag." This time, the laughter was louder. Aaron said nothing. He simply kept his eyes on his paper and tried to draw, but inside, his chest felt tight. Not because he didn't have a backpack, but because no one ever tried to understand why. During lunch, he sat alone again, watching raindrops slide down the school windows. He tried to dry the pages of his math book with a tissue. His stomach growled, but he barely touched his food. Miss Clara walked past the cafeteria and saw him from a distance. She paused, her heart aching. She knew she had to do something, but she also believed the best kind of kindness often comes from peers, not teachers. That afternoon, the class had group work. Since Aaron sat alone at the back, no one invited him to join their table. Miss Clara gently told him he could pair with any group, but the silence that followed from the students said enough. Aaron pretended to be fine. He always did. But that night, when he reached home, he didn't tell his mother anything. He just sat on his bed and stared at the plastic bag that held his books. For the first time, he whispered to himself, "I wish I didn't have to go tomorrow." The next morning, Aaron walked to school slowly, his steps heavy. He held his books like always, wrapped in the same worn plastic bag. The sky was clearer, but his heart wasn't. When he entered the classroom, something felt different. The lights were on and the students seemed unusually quiet. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. Aaron took a step forward, and then he froze. On his desk lay a brand new backpack. It was not just any backpack. It was blue, his favorite color. The zippers were shiny, the fabric crisp, and a small keychain hung from the side with his initials, A.S., written carefully on it. Aaron blinked, confused. He looked around the classroom. Every face was turned toward him. Miss Clara stood near the window, watching silently, her eyes soft and full of warmth. Daniel slowly stood up and walked toward him. His voice was quiet but clear. "We all noticed, and we should have noticed earlier," he said. "You never asked for anything, but we wanted to do this." Everyone helped. Aaron stared at the backpack, speechless. His hands trembled as he touched it gently, as if it might disappear. Rick, who had once mocked him, stepped forward too, looking a little nervous. "We put our pocket money together," he mumbled. "Sorry about before?" Some students nodded. Others looked down, ashamed of their silence in the past. But in that moment there was no laughter, no judgment, only sincere faces and quiet hope. Daniel opened the backpack and showed him what was inside. New notebooks, colored pencils, a lunchbox, even a water bottle. "I saw your pages got wet yesterday," Daniel said softly. "We didn't want that to happen again." For a moment, Aaron couldn't speak. His throat tightened and tears filled his eyes, but not from sadness this time. "Thank you," he finally whispered, his voice shaking. "Thank you so much." Miss Clara placed a hand over her heart, relieved and moved beyond words. She had only subtly mentioned Aaron's situation to a few students, hoping they might notice. But it was the class, not her, that turned a quiet ache into something beautiful. By lunchtime, Aaron walked outside with his new backpack snug on his shoulders. It felt light, not because it was empty, but because it carried kindness instead of shame. Daniel and a few others joined him at his table. They talked, slowly at first, but then with smiles. Even Rick sat nearby, trying awkwardly to be friendly. For the first time in a long time, Aaron didn't eat alone. That evening, when he went home, his mother noticed the backpack immediately. Her eyes widened in surprise, and when he told her what happened, she covered her mouth and cried softly, tears of gratitude, not worry. Aaron hugged her and said, "Mama, today was a good day." Sometimes the smallest act of noticing can change someone's world. Kindness doesn't need big words, just a brave heart. A backpack didn't just carry books that day, it carried love. One moment of compassion turned silence into friendship. And for Aaron, it was the day everything changed.